Children, if I want to talk to your manager parents, what has been your most embarrassing experience? We traveled a lot when we were younger and would skip lines at the airport since we were kids. But now we were all in our early teens and my mom faked having a heart condition to skip the long line to get on the airplane. Flight attendant would have none of it and told us to go back to the end of the line. I still remember the smiles and looks of everyone there. My mom has been this person regularly throughout my life, but I do have one positive story with it. Her and I went to eat at Portillo's when I was a teenager, and we sat in the back of the restaurant where it was more private, so we can eat in peace. About 10 minutes into our meal, two people come into the empty area and sit down to tables away from us. Turns out it was a manager and an employee that was getting written up. The manager was being a complete asshat towards the employee, criticizing and belittling them. My mom put down her food and walked over and started yelling at the manager for being such an asshole. She went on a rant about how rude and wrong it was of him to do this in front of the public 2 tables away from customers and really let him have it. She demanded the phone number of the manager above him, and we left after she received it. I was pretty embarrassed at the time, but as I got older I realized that she was standing up for that employee and how wrong that manager really was. I'm not 100% sure what she did with that phone number because I lived with my dad and I had to go home after that meal. The number of cashiers my father demanded the manager fire because they were too slow, rang us up wrong, etc., including one they actually did. I'll never forget that girl taking her Home Depot apron off and walking away sobbing. To his credit, I guess, my dad seemed surprised that it actually worked, must have felt at least some level of guilt, and never did it again. I bet the reason he never did it again is because he suddenly empathized with the cashier. Up until that moment he saw himself as the little guy being pushed around by forces outside his control, so he's pushing back as a kind of valiant hopeless defense. But when he saw the cashier take off her apron and cry, he realized that she's being pushed around by forces outside her control too, and that he's the one doing the pushing. It was probably a profound life-changing realization for him. Right, so my mum and me went shopping, and she dropped a melon on the way out. She then claimed it was bruised and demanded a full refund. When she refused, she shouted at customer service and demanded the manager. I just sat there with a kill me now expression on my face. After, one of the customer service employees gave me a chocolate bar, so 7-year-old me was happy. My mother did this in restaurants non-stop growing up. She would demand to see the manager because my burger, which I asked for medium, had some pink in it. I might be late, but my dad once asked the guy at the Verizon wireless store to give him his own social security number because he asked for my dad's. My dad walked out afterwards with some stranger's social security number on a post-it. I was a silent bystander because I really wanted my first phone. I was with my parents on vacation and the hotel put charges on the bill by accident. My mom marched to the front desk and demanded to see the manager. There was a long line, but she cut right in front of it. The manager wasn't very helpful, probably because she was rude. So my mom went to all the other customers in line and told them that the hotel was a scam and they were ripping us off with fake charges. She made a scene. The hotel called the police and we were escorted off the premises by actual cops. I died inside. Before Value Village, Savers in the States I think, changed policies. She would cut tags to get discounts, since the cashiers would basically make up whatever price they thought it would be on the spot. If they highballed it, she would get a manager involved, and I hated that. When I was a young child on a long distance flight, my mother let me and my brother sleep on the floor. For safety reasons, the flight attendants told my mother that we were not allowed to sleep on the floor. She started to argue with the flight attendants, who then turned to the pilots. The pilots threatened to turn the plane around unless we get up from the floor, but she continued to argue. The pilots announced they were about to turn around because of my mother, so all the passengers got pissed. Eventually she caved in when she had all passengers and flight crew on a Boeing 747 against her. I like that a parent got hit with the "I will turn this thing around" card. not the child, but I think this fits. I had this awful annoying AF terrible neighbor who, because I'm a giant sucker, I was kind to. She asked me to come with her to dinner because it was her birthday and I knew I was the only person on the planet who would go with her, and gosh darn it, it's her birthday. How could I say no? So she and I went, and we brought our kids, all girls, one mine, two hers. She makes her oldest do her math homework right there at the table. When the child asks her for help, mind you this is like 3rd grade math, the mom says it's too hard. I end up helping. The waiter is just fine. He comes by and takes our orders. She is already acting weird, but she always acted weird, so I didn't think much of it. Waiter comes by again and asks if we need anything. She dismisses him and waves him off and tells him no. Then like 30 seconds later turns to me and is like, "Can you believe how awful the waiter is? He won't even refill my drink." And just goes on about all these issues that literally don't exist. I'm like, he just asked if you needed anything. She cuts me off. I'm going to talk to the manager. Oh god. She talks to the manager like this is the worst experience she's ever had in the history of her miserable existence. I'm in shock. Her kids have their heads down. Mine is oblivious, lol. The manager gives her like half off the meal. Oh, and the cooker? That's my half, so you only need to pay the rest. Oh gee, thanks. I left a big tip and a note on my receipt telling them the waiter was great and apologizing for the complaints that were totally not warranted. It was the second most embarrassing restaurant experience of my life. My mother is a nightmare with customer service, even with the fact that her daughter works in customer service and deals with people like her on the daily. So many incidents stick out in my mind, but one that really embarrassed me was we were at Walmart. The stocker was struggling and dropped their price scanner thing on the ground. I was going to go help her gather her things she was struggling with when my mom came out like a bat out of hell and yelled, "You know you should pick that up, people could trip," and then she darted off with the cart. I was so embarrassed I just walked away in shame, and when I pointed it out to my mom the girl dropped it on accident. She said, "Well, she should be more careful." I worked at Best Buy. I stopped in with my mom one day because she wanted to buy me the Star Wars DVD box set for my birthday. I had a huge crush on the girl that was working the customer service counter. Well, the DVD set rang up $10 more than it was priced, and my mom deliberately didn't say anything until after the transaction, so she could claim the effing $5 Michigan scan law bounty. My crush didn't know how to process it, and the manager was busy, so my mom tore into her about how it was her job and how she should understand how to do things. At my job. To a girl I liked. My life was misery for a while afterward. My dad. He can be such a prick if you get his order wrong. It could be fast food or a nice sit-down restaurant. He often yells at wait staff if they undercook his steak. It has to be well done, or he claims to have lost his appetite. One time we went to Burger King when I was younger, and we sat down to eat. He took one bite of his burger, spit it out, and immediately started bitching about it being undercooked. He cut in front of everyone in line to yell at the cashier. Then he asked who was the cook. When the cook appeared, he launched his burger, hitting the poor kid directly in the face with a lidless burger. He's now banned for life from Burger King. My mom asked me to call her a taxi via an app. She ended up calling me multiple times complaining about how the driver didn't use the route she thought was best. She never owned a car and doesn't know how to drive, even though the guy just used the best possible route the navigator suggested. She ended up getting out halfway and using Subway. The driver proceeded to call me in tears, completely shocked, unsure of what he did so wrong, and apologizing. I felt like total shit. I never called her a cab again. My mom used to run restaurants. My stepfather used to be a chef in high-end restaurants and is the kind of guy who expects to be treated better than he is currently being treated, regardless of whatever that treatment is. They are not fun to go out to eat with. The most embarrassing experience is actually their most embarrassing experience, one where I embarrassed them. My wife and I pride ourselves on being a relief table when we go out to eat. Both of us have been servers, and there's always the counterpoint to the difficult table, that's us. Barring horrible service or bad food, we are super easy customers, tip well, and try to have a good time with our server. Furthermore, we just treat people nicely. So you can imagine our disdain when my parents act like they're fucking royalty at a dinner service. My wife and I went out to dinner with them. They were being particularly tough. My mom was acting like she was Gordon Ramsay analyzing the business, criticking everything down to the amount of bubbles in her seltzer. Looks like it's time to change the CO2. My stepdad was getting more and more heated over stupid things like the amount of ice in his drink and how the waitress didn't top off his water that he was barely sipping on fast enough. It came to a head when my stepfather ordered a steak medium well. It came back medium well, and for some reason he changed his mind that he wanted it medium rare while it was cooking, and they didn't read his mind, so he gave attitude, as did my mom. They jumped really quickly to demanding free stuff. I'm an adult and this may be the first time they realize this. I interrupted in front of the server and said something like, "Really? This is what you're doing? That's what you ordered?" I turned to the server and said, "We do not need anything comped." I then pulled out my wallet and handed her my card and said, "This is for the bill. We'll happily wrap up with what we have here. I'm very sorry for their behavior. You're doing great." Then the line that stung them so deep they still bring it up years later. I was taught to treat people nicely, a lesson that seems to be forgotten. "Thank you." They turned red. The server walked away. I looked down and cut my steak and didn't say a word. They were so flabbergasted that the meal was virtually silent, except me asking my stepfather how his steak was a few minutes later. I signed the check, gave a big tip, and we walked out and said goodbyes. They've been nicer to servers each time that we've gone out since.